Hi everybody, it's Maria from cardbomb.blogspot.com. I'm so glad to have you here today to join me for this Creating Kindness Design Team video hop. Today our hop focuses on fun fold cards, and I am doing what I'm calling a brochure card. I actually have no idea what this kind of card is called, but since it opens up from left to right just like a brochure does, that's what I've decided to call it. For this project I've used the stamp set called Bubble Over from Stampin' Up! And I was excited to use this set because I really wanted to make beer bottles. So I've started by using a piece of Whisper White cardstock and using chocolate chip and Old Olive ink to stamp my bottles. This is chocolate chip, and you'll see that I'm stamping two times, stamping once and then stamping off, and using my aqua painter to smooth out the ink a little bit. I wanted it to have a smoother look than it did having just stamped. I did even go ahead and blend a little bit on the solid bottles, and even though you can't see the difference in the video, it did make a difference in person. It looks like that last bottle needed a little bit more attention, and here I go with the Old Olive. Again, I'm stamping once full strength and then stamping a second time stamped off. Now with the chocolate chip bottles, I will end up using 3 of those on my card. With these Old Olive bottles, I will only use 2, and so I like to have an extra just in case I make a mistake, but you can also pick which bottles you think turn out after you have gone ahead and watercolored them and smoothed them out to try and give them a little bit of a glassier look. This just gives you an option to choose which bottles look the best and to use those ones on your card. I'm just about done blending my ink here, and it's time to start stamping some of the other details of the card. So here I've got these stars on some of the bottles, and I'm going to stamp those in chocolate chip ink. And I'm stamping them on the side of the paper on purpose because in a minute I'm going to punch them out with a 3/4 inch punch. Now I'm using the smaller of the 2 label stamps, and I'm stamping full strength and stamping off in both Old Olive and Sahara Sand inks. Then I'm using Old Olive ink to stamp this little geometric shape, which will end up being a second layer on my beer bottle labels. I used archival black ink to stamp my sentiment and decided to cut my beer bottles off my paper so that I could do this next step a little bit more easily. I wanted my bottles to look like glass, so I decided that I was going to use clear embossing on all of them. So I used Versamark ink and the same beer bottle stamp just to stamp directly on top of all of them. I made sure that every single beer bottle had a thick layer of Versamark. You can't see it in this video because I edited some of it out, but some of them I stamped twice just to make sure that they were well covered. Now that all my bottles are covered in Versamark ink, I'm going to grab my clear embossing and cover all of the beer bottles with it. Because the Versamark ink is sticky, the powder will adhere to it and give a nice coating. Once all of my beer bottles are coated, I can then use my heat tool to melt the powder. I got lucky when I was covering this long strip of bottles with the embossing powder because I was able to do the whole row of bottles all at once, and that made my job really quick and easy. So let me get that powder out of the way and grab my heat tool, and as the powder starts to melt, you can see that it starts to get shiny and glassy, and it really does start to look like a beer bottle. So if you've never used embossing powder before or you're newer to it, then I want to make sure you know that the process is not as quick as I'm making it look. I did speed the video up so that you wouldn't have to watch me do the whole process. But when you do this on your own, hold your heat tool a couple of inches away from your paper and move it around until your embossing powder starts to melt. And make sure that you get all of it melted or it will brush off afterwards. And this is what the bottles look like after they're all glossy. I was really happy with how they came out, and I think that my favorites are the green bottles, but I do like the stamped off brown ones as well. Now I'm using that 3/4 inch punch to punch out those stars, and now you can see why I stamped them on the edge of the paper at the beginning. I'm going to head off to the big shot and punch all my stuff out, and here it is. Ta-da! Now the first thing that I'm going to do to get my bottles ready is to put these little bottle caps on them, and you might be wondering where those bottle caps came from because we didn't stamp them. So those are in the framelit set that is bundled together with this Bubbles Over stamp set, and they're really adorable. They're one of my favorite things from this framelit set. They have little crimped edges and they really do look like bottle caps. So I used a glue dot, folded in half to add those on, and now I'm just using my fast fuse to add my labels onto all of my beer bottles. For me, it works better to put all the bottles together and then assemble the card all at once, but if it's easier for you to assemble the beer bottles as you go along making your card, you can do it that way. So I'm going to quickly get all of those labels onto my beer bottles. I'm using Fast Fuse because it's my favorite adhesive and it's really strong. You could also use a liquid adhesive or even glue dots, just depending on what your preference is. Now that those are all together, we are going to put the card together. So here are all of the pieces that you'll need, and don't worry, at the end of the video I'm going to have a graphic with all of the measurements that you will need. So I've got a card base in garden green, a DSP piece, a white card looking piece, and 2 more pieces of DSP, a little flappy thing, and some stitch circle framelits. I'm going to start by using my Fast Fuse to put that wooden DSP on top of my garden green card base. And those 2 pieces are exactly the same size. They are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I'm going to use the second DSP piece, which is 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and I'm going to put that on top of this backwards card, which is 5 by 7 1/2, and scored at 3 3/4. Now this card piece is going to go dead center of your card base, and it's going to be oriented to open up backwards, so the opposite of how a book opens. You can't put it on the card right away because this little flappy piece that is soft sky needs to adhere behind it so that that back flap will be hidden. You don't want it to be wrapped around the side of the card base and be visible on the back of the card. So you see how I went ahead and did that, and whoops, I got some adhesive on the inside. No big deal, I just erased it. Now I'm going to adhere my card to the card base, and I used quite a bit more Fast Fuse for this because I want to make sure that it adheres very well. So here I go, it's centered there. Press it on firmly, and now we are going to attach the strip of DSP to the bottom. That strip of DSP is 1 1/2 inches by 7 1/2 inches, and actually I cut it a little bit longer because sometimes when you put these on they end up just a tiny bit shy, or once you fold the card base they end up a little bit short, and I never think that looks good, so I tend to cut them a little bit longer than I need to and just trim off the edge after I adhere them. So here we go with the circle stitched framelits, and just going to adhere that right in the center of that soft sky flap. So you see how it's going to be sort of a background for my beer bottles. Now putting the rest of the card together is going to be a breeze because all the beer bottles are already pre-made. So I'm going to go ahead and use one of those stamped off old olive bottles with the star on it for my backdrop, and then I'm going to use dimensionals to pop out one of the stamped off chocolate chip bottles with the Have a Birthday Brew sentiment on it. Now make sure you don't push that top down and accidentally stick the top of your beer bottle to the card piece behind it. Now we are going to take the next stitch circle framelit and add that on the back, lining it up perfectly with the one from the front. Now we're going to add more beer bottles, and what you need to be careful of here is making sure that they are exactly lined up with the bottles that are on the front of the card. That's why I added these. I didn't want you to be seeing the rough background from the front of the card, and I thought it looked pretty cool to have that flap swing open and you would see more bottles instead of just the back side of the front. So now we've got to put that beer bottle on that's on the inside of the card, and that's just a quick bit of Fast Fuse, and stick it on, and just like that this card is done. Brochure fold card. Or maybe not. If you think it has another name, please do tell me. Now I promised you some measurements, and here they are. Go ahead and snap a screenshot of that. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've liked my video, please give me a thumbs up. Better yet, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any videos in the future. If you're interested in purchasing any of the products that I've used today, there are links to both my shop and blog in the description below. Have an amazing day, and I'll see y'all back here real soon. Bye-bye.